So, welcome to this episode of Menopause Conversations. My name's Amantha King. I'm a workplace menopause consultant and executive performance coach, and I'm delighted to have my friend and colleague Naomi Glover here with me today. Hi, Naomi, how are you?
No, I'm really well, thank you. Thanks so much for inviting me. It's lovely to be here.
Oh, no, it's a real pleasure. And we've chatted quite a bit recently, and we just knew that this was a perfect opportunity to have Naomi on. So we're going to be talking about how to look after your brain health, your cognitive health during menopause. So I'm going to just do a small introduction about Naomi, but really this is a small summary for what is a very large and comprehensive career. But Naomi is the founder of Neuro-Informed, a consultancy that actually translates neuroscience into practical tools for performance learning and wellbeing. She holds a master's degree in applied neuroscience from King's College London, and she'll tell us a bit more about that. And she's been developing people and organisations for over 25 years. And she also teaches brain longevity specialists at the Alzheimer's Research and Prevention Foundation in the US. And she's got a fabulous little story about how she got involved with that. So I'll let her expand on that. But she's into coaching, training, developing brain health gyms that help individuals. And I think this is the important bit. It helps individuals help themselves and organizations to help their people to optimize their brain health. So neuroscience is a really exciting area. It's really accessible, and Naomi really makes it accessible and brings it to life. And so I thought she would be a fantastic speaker, particularly with a focus on menopause, which is what she's into anyway, and women's place in the workplace, to share this conversation with me. You know, she believes that every woman deserves to understand their brain, the changes that are taking place. And because, you know, so many symptoms pop up during this time, it's very hard to know what's relating to what. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Naomi to Menopause Conversations. So hello, Naomi. Thank you for
Hel-
being here.
Hello, and thank you. Thank you again for having me.
Oh no, you're so welcome. So give us a little bit of a flavour about you then. I mean, how does Naomi Glover find herself in 2025 rocking world stages talking about cognitive brain health?
So that is a brilliant question to start with. I think and it's as unexpected to me as it was to as it is to others. I think I got fascinated about the brain about 15 years ago when two people in my life who I loved suddenly started experiencing very similar overlapping problems. So there were things about memory lapses, frustration, emotional ups and downs, difficulty learning new things, difficulty organizing themselves, difficulty making decisions, and a general sort of frustration. And the odd thing about this was that one of them was in their 70s and the other one was seven. And so that the similarities between them fascinated me. And my dad had was later diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and my daughter, who was the other one, was diagnosed with dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, and later ADHD. And so I was seeing this combination of not just mental health challenges like anxiety, but cognitive health challenges like how to, learning new things and remembering things. And I got really curious because there wasn't a lot of research about what we could do to help cognitive health and if there was anything that we could do. And now here we are 15 years later, and there are so many things that we can do to improve and keep our brains healthier and sharper for longer right throughout our lives. But still, most people don't know. And so my absolute passion is for sharing this information and letting people know that you can change your brain for the better right the way throughout your lives.
Yes, because there's that plasticity, isn't there?
Absolutely.
And it's an exciting space as we understand more about the expansion of our brain's capability at certain times in our life, the contraction of it at certain times. And certainly as a postmenopausal woman, I definitely feel I'm coming back into that stage of expansion. You know, there's parts of my brain that really like a supercharged, almost overworking, and there are parts that are underworking. And we'll explore a little bit more about that because I think tech can be really helpful, either in understanding where we're starting from, getting us from here to there, and then supporting ourselves. So I'm so excited about this conversation. So let's get started, shall we? I've asked Naomi if she wouldn't mind just, there's so much we could talk about, but we've tried to hone it into sort of five key areas. But I was asking Naomi from a neuroscience perspective, what happens to the brain during menopause? Because even yesterday I was with people and they were saying to me, oh my God, is brain fog, the fact that I can't remember what I was doing yesterday, or I can't remember someone's name, and I worked with them for 5 years. People are saying, oh, is this it? Or is this something else I should be worried about? So can you tell us, how do these changes link to common symptoms like brain fog, memory lapses, or mood shifts?
It's a really good question, and it's one that crops up a lot when I'm working in workplaces. And in fact, so many women get really panicked and increasingly are asking questions like, is this dementia? I'm really worried that I'm getting dementia. And I understand that because I was worrying about the same thing when I hit my perimenopause, and especially having seen my dad's deterioration. Um, so there are a lot of people who really worry about the brain lapses, but those brain fog lapses, which we associate with menopause, actually we spot them at other times throughout our lives as well, don't we? We see them, brain fog in perimenopause, in pregnancy. We see brain fog in puberty. We see people being suddenly more forgetful. So what we've noticed now, and what's increasingly being understood about the female brain, though it's been slow to come, is women's brains are changing right throughout our lives, and our estrogen levels, our hormone levels, massively impact the brain. And so, instead of thinking about these transitions just as health transitions for puberty or pregnancy or perimenopause and menopause, we should actually be thinking about them as neurological transitions. Our brains are changing, and they're changing all the time. And there are things that can make our brains change for the worse, and there are things that can make our brains change for the better. But when our estrogen drops, our ability to be able to gain energy from glucose in the brain, which is what normally powers our brains, glucose, our ability to do that drops during menopause, because we don't have that really important estrogen. And people forget, they think that estrogen is to do with your sort of gynecological issues, which of course it is, but it's also in every cell of the body, as you know, and I'm sure you tell all your clients. So estrogen is critical to what we're doing. And when our estrogen levels drop, our brains can no longer process in the same way. They can't think in the same way. And this is why we start seeing cognitive changes in things like perimenopause. And there is some very interesting research very recently from a brilliant researcher in the US called Roberta Diaz-Brinton, who has found that when those changes happen, we stop being able to process glucose. Our brains start looking to use ketone bodies instead. And they're actually, it seems that our brains might be breaking down bits of our white matter, which is like the important stuff that's like an insulator strip. If you imagine
Okay.
like insulation wire that goes around neurons and that helps those connections to fire more quickly, that actually starts breaking down a little bit in menopause, in perimenopause, because our brains are trying to break it down to create more ketone bodies, which I think so that they can actually think. So this is and this is really recent research.
Mm.
So I think this is really important for helping us to understand why some of the factors like the intermittent fasting that I'm sure some of your
Mm.
previous interviewees have spoken about, nutrition, exercise, all of these things are so important.
That's so fascinating because for people, it shows up, doesn't it, in that I'm not sleeping so well. I feel tired. I've got no
Mm,
energy. I'm going to lean on the caffeine,
yeah.
and back round the cycle goes. I'm not sleeping so well. Actually, I'm really struggling. I'm pushing myself. I'm not doing any exercise. I'll have wine. There's no judgment here. I've done all of the things I've just described. Um, but you can see how quite quickly we get into the coping mechanism type strategies.
Absolutely. And what you see is that that creates this sort of vicious cycle where their sleep is disrupted because of their poor because of hot flashes
Yes.
or sleep night sweats. And so they haven't slept properly. Then they wake up and they're anxious. And we know that anxiety is associated with poorer sleep. So you wake up, you're more anxious, and you make poorer decisions because you need good sleep in order to make good decisions. Then you go to work in a rush, you're panic stricken, especially if you don't have much flexibility. So you go to work in a
Mhm.
rush, you haven't slept properly, you're trying to make decisions, which makes you more anxious. And then you end up staying at work later and later and later to try and keep up. And then by the time you get home, you're too tired to eat properly or to cook properly. And you go to bed frazzled and overwhelmed and overthinking, which is what I hear a lot. I'm overwhelmed.
Mm.
I'm overthinking all the time. And then, so then that leads to another night of poor sleep. Even, even if you're managing the night sweats, people are still getting into these cycles. And it's so for me, it's about what can we do to help people to interrupt those cycles at some point.
Yes. And I think that's such a brilliant way that you've described all of that, Naomi, because the self-doubt can be massive, and we're talking about women at all stages in their lives and at all levels in workplaces. And, some people work in organizations where they don't have an EAP program, it's just them and a very small team. So I think you're opening up something that's really, really important. And then when we think about sort of like even like the justice system, how many people are incarcerated or in a probation system because they made bad decisions based on how their neurobiology is showing up. And, so I think it opens up a really broad set of, we need more questions, really, don't we? And it's great that we're getting some research coming through, but as we know, we need a plethora, we need a dearth of research, don't we, to sort of really make sure we understand what's going on here. So yeah, so I agree completely. And just statistically, we always quote that on average, women will spend anywhere between 2 to 4 hours extra unpaid work every single week for exactly the reasons that you just described. So I suppose that let's give people some hope then, because there's always hope. And if anyone can give us hope, it's Naomi. So what evidence-based tools or brain health habits do you actually recommend for women in midlife who want to protect or improve their cognitive health? What can we do?
Really, it's so important to be thinking about those lifestyle interventions because historically, people have thought that there was nothing they could do to look after their brain, that it stopped changing in childhood. That was it, game over. We know that you can do lots and your brain's changing all the time. So I think about the fact that your brain is changing all the time and there are things that will make it work less well. There are things that will make it work better. And so it's a case of switching over from the things that might be damaging your brain to the things that can help it to function better. And so we know things that can cause your brain to be working less well. Some of those things might be happening in the workplace. So people are in back-to-back meetings. They are constantly on the run. They're sitting at their desk all day and not moving around very much. Think people are not eating very well in the workplace. And so these factors, which I get people to think about how many of these things are they doing in their day,
Mm,
just chasing their tail. Um, how can we stop doing some of those things and be a bit more proactive about having gaps between meetings to let our brain have a break? That's really important. Even if it's short brain breaks between meetings, schedule your meetings for shorter times. Have things like working on your diet. So there's a diet called the Mind Diet,
okay.
which has been evidenced to improve cognitive function. And so
Wow.
when people are using the Mind Diet, they are they have a reduced risk of cognitive decline. And in fact, when people are really adhering to it, it can actually improve your cognitive function, improve how your brain is working. And that mind diet is one that's been based largely around the Mediterranean diet, but
Yes.
it's very, very simple. You can get a tick list, which I'll share with you in
We'll
the
put that
show
in the resources,
notes.
shall
Yeah.
we? That would be great.
With just a tick list of, these are the things that you should eat more of and try to avoid these things. But when people even mostly stick with it, it's still really protective. It's neuroprotective. So it's things like your fatty fishes, like your salmon and anchovies, sardines, mackerels, herring, those kind of key oily fishes. But even for people who are vegan, there's lots of things that they can eat, and in fact, even being vegan and vegetarian seems to be neuroprotective. Lots of berries, again, evidence to improve how your brain functions, and just give your brain a boost. Darker berries, the better.
Yes.
So there's food related things, and then there's exercise. So we know that going out and getting some exercise is incredibly good for the brain, and it's not just that it's pumping more oxygen around your brain, which is good, but there's this amazing thing. It's like Miracle Grow for the brain called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, and it actually helps to grow new neurons, new brain cells in that key area of your brain, the hippocampus, which is key for memory. And so exercise actually helps give that a real boost, so you can get more neurons growing where you most need them, more brain cells. So exercise, relaxation to give your brain a break, yoga in particular, and
Yes.
especially for women, has been found to be particularly useful. And there's a wonderful researcher in the States called Helen Lavretsky, who has done remarkable research looking at telomeres. Have you talked about
Yes.
telomeres on your...
No, no, but you do. Please do.
So telomeres are these little things that are like, the little plastic ties that you get at the end of shoelaces,
Yeah.
which
A flugel binder, I
is
believe they're
it.
called.
Oh, I did not know that.
I only know that from a Tom Cruise film. It's called a flugel binder.
I had no idea. I love that. Right. So they're like flugel binders. So if I say to people, your telomeres are like flugel binders, everybody will know what I
No,
mean.
they won't. I think stick with your explanation.
So like the little plastic bits that you get on the end of shoelaces that keep your shoelaces together, and as you but they sit at the end of your bits of DNA, so at the end of your chromosomes, and they keep your DNA from unraveling,
Yeah.
so that you can create new cells properly. And when those telomeres, as we get older, those telomeres get shorter. And as they get shorter, it's more associated with things going wrong in your cells, which isn't surprising because our DNA finds it harder to make accurate copies.
Yeah.
So, but what they've found is that things like yoga seem to actually increase telomere length. So which is associated with being younger. So this is amazing research,
Yeah.
that it's not just that people are more active, but there's actually something going on at a cellular level, at a DNA level, which is improving how our sort of healthy aging, and keeping our brains healthier and the rest of our bodies healthier. And one of those things is called Kirtan Kriya, which is a type of yoga meditation. I don't know if you've come across this.
No.
They did some specific recent research into a type of yoga called Kirtan Kriya, and they did it in women particularly.
Hmm?
And that's rare because most research isn't done in women.
No.
And they looked at women who were starting to have some memory lapses, having some cognitive challenges, and they found that by when women were doing this Kirtan Kriya 12 minutes a day, which is a
Hmm.
sort of chanting yoga meditation, that they improved their cognition. They were clearer, so they were actually having all of these cognitive benefits compared to the alternative, which was a sort of music meditation type class. So it's there's something
Mm.
specific about Kirtan Kriya which seems to be protective, particularly for women. Takes 12 minutes a day, and it's a sort of chanting meditation where there are some things that you say and some things that you do with your fingers at the same time.
Okay.
And there's a they think that it's the combination between your tongue's movement in your mouth, hitting various areas of your mouth, combined with your finger movements and the sound that's really activating so much of your brain all at the same time that it's helping with the
Wow.
wiring and helping
Wow.
increase brain activity.
Well, if we can have anything links or thing further reading for people to do, let's get that in
Absolutely,
the
I
show
want.
notes. Yeah, and because I don't know how to spell it, you don't want to see how I've attempted to spell that on my
I
notes.
will send you some links, but it's yeah. So people use this meditation and it's just 12 minutes a day, but seems to be extremely effective.
Yeah, I love the idea of that. So I did a breathwork course recently, and it was all I probably should introduce you to Dr. Louise Oliver, but she's been on the podcast. It's all about the placement of your tongue when you're sleeping, because sleep apnea increases during perimenopause,
Yes.
restrictive breathing, all of these things. So it does have a real that also lack of oxygen in our brain overnight puts us in cortisol overwhelm and all sorts of horrible things happening overnight. But I just myself, I do until I had my foot injury. I really loved yoga, and the sorts of yoga where you're holding positions for long periods of time, and just that. It's only now, actually. I can't give a better description. And I just felt more relaxed. And we were talking earlier before we came on the podcast, and I said the sort of things that make me anxious now you would not believe. So I'm going to show a little bit of vulnerability here because I think it's very easy for people to think, look at her, she's got it all rocking and going on. And it's not really that case. I've made quite a few changes in my life. I have a very different relationship with alcohol now because I know as much as I enjoy the taste of it, my body doesn't enjoy the effects of it. And even one glass means I just don't sleep well. And then I think that affects how I turn up the next day. So prioritizing sleep as well. I have been terrible all my life. I'm a good sleeper, but I go to bed too late. So what I've realized is I updated my Apple Watch. I now have better amounts of deep sleep, deep restorative sleep, and better bulks. And I love I was really smiling then when you said about the BDNF because in our own work programs, we always insist it's never more than 90 minutes and we always have a break every 45 minutes. Get up, walk around, move around, come back, change of state, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Um, but tech I have found to be invaluable. And I was just laughing. I said to Naomi, I'm really excited because I've bought a piece of tech to help me, a note taking, electronic note taking, because that's the thing that makes me overwhelmed. And some people say, well, sort that out then. But it's like, at my sort of age, I'm going to be 54 next week. There's certain habits that are really hardwired and ingrained, and I've always taken notes. But then it's like the stress of like trying to find those notes and actually what did I mean by those notes? So actually, is there something also that maybe organizations can support? I suppose we're moving to the next sort of questions, which is in the workplace. What else can be available to us? Yes, lifestyle, and that's the theme for this year's World Menopause Month, which is lifestyle medicine. So it's all the things that Naomi's talking about. We've got to take responsibility for what we eat. We've got to take responsibility for how we conduct ourselves. Sometimes it's not pointing the fingers out. We need to point them in and also ask what's contributing to how we're feeling. But let me just reframe in terms of question three then, which I was asking you, which is actually how do menopause related cognitive changes show up in the workplace and what can they do and you do to ensure that your performance is okay, ensure that your well-being, well, let's put it the right way around, that your well-being so you can thrive at work, not just survive.
Yeah. Looking at the workplace, when we focus on the workplace, I tend to talk about there needing to be this kind of two-pronged approach, which I think is exactly what you were saying just there, Amantha, where we have to give people the ability to manage their own health, to understand their own risk factors and what they can do personally, lifestyle wise, to protect themselves. But then there are also things that workplaces can do to optimize their workplaces so that people can think better. And when you help people, whether that's that they're having brain fog in menopause or whatever else is causing their brain fog, when
Yes.
you help to make a workplace more brain friendly, you're going to make it easier for everybody to think. Everybody can make better decisions. Everybody can think better and focus better and be less distracted. And that's what workplaces really want. And when we have those things, we're also less stressed, less anxious, less overwhelmed, less overthinking. So, what some of the things that workplaces can do to make their workplaces more brain friendly? Think about think about what are you doing in terms of flexibility, because if you're demanding that people arrive at a specific time and they haven't slept, you are simply not going to get the best from them. They will be stressed, they will be anxious, and they will make poorer decisions. So if you want your people to be able to function at their best, giving them as much flexibility as possible, and that's for everybody, but particularly in menopause, having that flexibility is absolutely critical, because it means that people can finish their sleeping and then come in if they need to, if they need that flexibility, if they're exhausted in the middle of the day, rather than trying to ram through some work, they can take a break, take a rest, come back to it. Giving people the ability to work from home if they can is evidence to be helpful. I know some people can't, but giving people that opportunity to physically rest. Think about what you've got in your canteen. Is it really unhealthy foods, or are there options for people to choose that will be genuinely brain healthy? Can you have a brain boost at lunchtime? What are the sorts of snacks that are in your workplace? Is it sweets and chocolate, or is it fruit and berries? Just small tweaks that will help everybody's brain to work better. Things One of the things that I also do in workplaces is talk to them about neurotech and brain gyms. And
Mm.
lots of organizations have mental health first aiders, and
Okay.
they've thought increasingly about what they can do to improve mental health at work. But these challenges that we're talking about, brain fog, burnout, overwhelm, overthinking, decision paralysis, memory lapses, these are cognitive challenges, not mental health challenges. And typically, workplaces aren't measuring for cognitive health. They're not asking people about their cognitive health. They ask about mental health, but not about cognitive health. And many of them don't yet realize that you can measure cognitive health, that you can help people to proactively improve their cognitive health so that they're thinking better. I think anything that one of the key things that workplaces can do is actually start asking your staff, how's your cognitive health? Are you experiencing, and do it anonymously, obviously.
Yeah,
You
of
need to be
course.
doing this anonymously to understand, so that people don't feel stigmatized by it. But that's the other benefit, I think, of making your workplace generally more brain friendly, more brain healthy, so that when regardless of what the underpinning issue is behind brain fog, they don't have to feel the stigma of it. There's an approach to help.
Yeah, I love that. And can I say I can't name the company, but I was away working with a sales team this week. Honestly, I think they'd get a Naomi Glover gold star.
Oh, brain
Seriously.
healthy.
Oh my gosh, there was no beige anywhere on site. There was more water. They were literally walked in. There were high protein yogurts in the fridge, all sorts of dairy milk, non-dairy milk. There for lunch, salmon, a poached salmon fillet, quinoa, fresh vegetables, fruit,
Amazing.
fruit all day if you wanted it.
I'm
It
going to
was
talk to you after about who that is.
properly impressive. And then a Greek yogurt posset type thing.
Fantastic.
And I was doing an all-day session. Honestly, there was no postprandial dips. And I'm honestly not just saying that. I was, like as a trainer and facilitator, you dread post-lunch, don't you? Because
Yes, yeah.
the dips are horrendous.
Yes.
We had none of that.
And that's so interesting because that completely aligns with the research and what you can do in terms of food. I loved what you said about there was no the in terms of the interior, because that's something else that workplaces can do is by having an interior that's biophilically designed. If people have come across that term,
Yeah.
so biophilic design is where you have an interior that's kind of inspired by nature. It mimics nature in
Yes, the
some way.
biophilic.
Yes.
Yes.
And our brains work better. They're more relaxed. They're less stressed in a biophilic environment than they are in a white box.
Yeah, no, I was really impressed, properly impressed. And it's not the only organisation I've been to. I have to say the pharmaceutical sector are very good at this, actually. I've been to another place where they actually have on-site chefs, so you can have egg white omelettes cooked and things like this, and buffets, salad bars, lots of nice natural light coming in
I
so
bet.
people feel energized. I did speak to a workplace design consultant who I definitely think would be a great contact for you. And she's all about disability and inclusion and workspaces and talking about lighting over desks, temperature over desks, that whole, like you just brilliantly said, bringing nature inside because our nervous systems just feel calmer. So I think there's a lot of, I don't like the phrase quick wins, but if companies were thinking like, okay, how do we address this? It's actually not as difficult as you think. And I think that's the first challenge. Having someone like Naomi come in, she'll make it very clear, like we do with menopause, it's not difficult, but actually having someone who's dedicated to helping people understand how to do it takes the hard work out of it and all the guesswork, if you like. So I think those are really, really important. And it can just start with stop the back-to-back meetings. It's
Yes.
it's so detrimental to people, and particularly with a menopause perspective. Let's imagine you're flooding,
Yeah.
and any woman will tell you no menstrual pad or tampon is going to last long enough. You're going to need to sort yourself out. And that's great if you're in an office. But what if you're on a production line? People need to have these regular breaks. They need to have pit stops to just, address how they're feeling. And we actually need managers who care to ask as well, Naomi. I'm just going to call that out.
Do you know it's really good that you mentioned the managers, because the research shows that at the moment 47% of workers across the world, global workers, are experiencing symptoms of burnout, which of course contributes, yeah, 47%. Amazing, isn't it? And that contributes to burnout. It contributes to brain fog. It contributes to memory lapses. It contributes to all of these other cognitive symptoms. You can't think clearly if you're burnt out. So with 47% of the workforce globally, and it's 47 or 48% in the UK specifically,
Wow.
experiencing symptoms of burnout right now, the Boston Consulting Group looked at this, and they were looking at the measures, who's experiencing it. There are certain groups at greater risk of burnout, as you would expect, women, as you would expect, LGBTQ plus communities who are experiencing more pressure, less inclusion, and neurodivergent people who are experiencing, again, less inclusion. And they found that one of the key things that improves this is inclusive managers. So when managers are inclusive, burnout is halved.
Wow.
So that was Boston Consulting Group. Again, I'll send you a link to
Yes,
that and we'll put that
please.
into the show notes.
Yeah.
And they found that the key thing in improving inclusion is educating your leaders, educating your leaders and your managers, your team managers, so that they are inclusive.
I can't write fast enough, but that's brilliant. And that's what we find too in our work, Naomi. People don't leave bad companies. They leave bad leaders, bad managers, people
Yeah.
who aren't supportive. And in our work, we often see the minute you mention menopause, the eyes hit the floor. People don't want to look up and engage with the topic. And I'm afraid I'm going to be an ex-manager who says publicly, if you don't like people, don't be a manager. If you're not interested in the well-being of people, don't be a manager. Because actually, I'm here to tell you, as a manager, it is your responsibility. It's not just about working people harder to get the results. You need to care about people. And if you're finding you're at a stage in life where you don't care about people, maybe reassess your career ambitions.
I was at a conference recently where we were talking to 70 HR leaders about this exact thing, and one of the things, a lady called Gemma Ellison who works a lot with leaders, who I'll introduce you to if you don't know.
Yeah,
She's
yeah,
brilliant,
lovely.
absolutely fantastic, working in neurodiversity, in particular. But she was emphasizing again that she sees lots of leaders who don't want to be leaders. They actually not interested in people, but they've been put in that position because they were good at what they do. And we
Yeah.
have to stop promoting people into management positions just because they are good at what they do. They can be a subject matter expert. They don't have to be a people manager. You need to have senior positions for subject matter experts, for people who really know what they can do. They're doing and can really advise people on how best to do that task or to achieve that goal without necessarily managing the people, because that takes different skills. And the people managers don't necessarily need to be experts in the specific task. They can be experts in getting the best out of those people.
Exactly. So in my other role, my other hat with as a strength scope coach, that's exactly what we do. We look at what motivates and energizes
Yeah.
people. And I would be very cautious if I did a strength scope on someone and it showed that really in the relational quadrant, they've got no motivation or energy. I would be saying, let's re think about how we redeploy that person so that they're motivated and energized. You're absolutely right, though. We can all think of a really great manager we've had in our careers. And I'm pretty sure we can already think of a really awful, toxic one. And we probably remember the toxic, awful one probably slightly more than we do. And that's just how we're hardwired. So I think that, it's not just about the bricks and mortar. That's one thing. Get that all sorted, what you're feeding people, how you're enabling people to show up. But actually, who's looking after those people on a day-to-day basis or not?
Yeah.
So I think that's really, really powerful. I knew this would happen, Naomi. We'd have so much to talk about. We wouldn't get through all our questions, but we're doing okay. So we've covered off, what it is, what cognitive function is, how people can help themselves, how workplaces can help. Um, I suppose we've covered a little bit of the lifestyle, a little bit of neurodiversity. I mean, I would like to expand on that just a little bit more, if that's
Mm.
okay with you.
Mm.
Um, which is that we see, don't we? As you rightly pointed out, it's ADHD Awareness Month, which
Yeah.
is in October. It's also World Menopause Month. Now, we know, don't we? Those two things intersect like this. They knit together so closely. Can you tell us why, in a way that might make people go, what? You're saying that the two things are linked possibly, or how they connect together at the same time. What's going on there, Naomi? Are we seeing an increase in ADHD or something else?
We are seeing an increase in diagnosis of ADHD,
Okay.
and particularly in populations where it hasn't previously been diagnosed, where it's been underdiagnosed in the past. So, ADHD diagnosis was based on 10-year-old boys predominantly in classrooms throwing chairs around. And that was the understanding of what ADHD was like. It was only realized quite recently that it could be experienced in adulthood. And it was realized even more recently that it could coincide with things like autism or OCD and other co-occurring factors. But the biggest game changer, I think, is that it used to be thought that when people had ADHD, it sort of wore off in adulthood. And we now know that it actually accelerates. So the time that women talk about ADHD having their biggest impact on them is during menopause. And so people who already knew they had ADHD, who were diagnosed, women who were diagnosed younger in life, find that menopause is the biggest, most impactful time for them. And for those women who are not diagnosed, as I wasn't, many are diagnosed when they hit menopause and when they hit perimenopause, and the symptoms are exacerbated. So problems like brain fog, memory lapses, disorganization are just so much bigger in women who have both ADHD and perimenopause at the same time. So the diagnosis can help because people start to understand it, but it's that often it's that women have had coping mechanisms, and so they've been managing, perhaps they've been managing their ADHD by working longer hours, by having more strategies in place. by looking after themselves better. Often it's just been by working extra hard. Typically, it's working extra hard. Then menopause happens, and you simply can't because your sleep is disrupted and your anxiety is absolutely massively increased by the changes in estrogen in your brain. And so those symptoms are exacerbated, and we have to deal with them really proactively. And so it's not an increase in people having ADHD, but we're definitely getting more people diagnosed, which is helpful, really helpful.
Yeah, really, really helpful. And, you know, I think for so many of us, it's like one of those Venn diagrams that you just put lots of circles on. Relationships changing. You might be a single parent. You might have
Mm,
financial issues. Your children leaving home, looking after elderly parents.
mm.
It's hard to dissect what's what, basically, isn't it? And like you say, getting the diagnosis for some people is that moment where it's like, yeah. And actually, you can get support. We were talking about this before, weren't we? Which is, there is government support available for those that need either help with the tech or whatever way you need to support yourself with the things that are challenging you. And workplaces can help with that too. What's the scheme called again, Naomi?
The access to work scheme. So that's something that people with ADHD, or in fact any disability, can use to access work to help them with to get. It might be technology, it might be additional support, it might be coaching. They can use it to pay for coaching. So lots of things they can use it to help pay for. Workplaces can access it, and so can individuals. So you can be a sole trader, you can be working for yourself and still get access to work support. So
Yeah.
that, though the waiting list is long,
It's huge, yeah,
unfortunately.
yeah, and we're not talking weeks, we're talking months, you know.
Yeah.
So the reality is, organisations can still step up with this, and to give people what they need. And I would also just say to people, when you do think if you want to get your diagnosis, if it's for you or a younger person, do really do your homework on that and make sure, because if you're looking for shared care. You have to use organisations that are vetted by the NHS and are partnering with the NHS.
Yeah.
If you don't, you'll end up having to foot prescribing costs yourself. I mean, I did see recently as well, because I know a lot of people are really nervous about the medicating side of ADHD, but actually there is encouraging research coming through showing how beneficial it can be having the medication, can't it, for younger people?
Absolutely. Well, for everybody. So historically, people have thought about medication as being risky,
Yes.
and so they think about the risks of medicating, but they haven't typically thought about the risks of not medicating. And so people who have ADHD are at higher risk of all-cause mortality, things like chronic health conditions, but also issues, habits like drinking too much, using drugs. So there's lots of issues, that health issues that affect women with ADHD, but also chronic pain and things like,
Mm.
the things that you would never imagine were linked, and hypermobility, which and Ehlers-Danlos loss. So there are so many intersecting things which are now thought to be genetic, but haven't really been explored. But taking the medication has just very recently been shown to actually reduce risk of death, early death, in people who have ADHD. So taking that medication, ideally within 3 months of a diagnosis, seems to reduce your risk of early death, early accidents, all sorts of negative impact of ADHD.
Yes,
And
and
it
this is what I love about research, isn't it? It's like, just when you think, yeah, it's like, no, there's the next thing's coming in. So it's important. And I think that's important about what your role is, Naomi, because you are very research focused, because you keep ahead of the curve. Actually, you're getting someone, and this is what we find is so frustrating, is about, where people are consuming their information. So I would say having someone like Naomi come into your organization is a really, really important thing to do, because actually a lot of information online can be either misleading. There's a lot, I would imagine, a bit like menopause, it's $1 billion space.
Oh
I would
yeah.
imagine the same for mental health, well-being, cognitive health. There's a lot of stuff out there. It's like how do you sort through it all? So coming to you, I think, would be really sensible, wouldn't it?
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's really important because we don't. A lot of people poo-poo the idea of being able to improve their brain, for example. And there's been a lot of research that said, these brain games are good, and so then people go and play on brain games because they want to improve their brain. And then there's research that comes out and says, oh, brain games aren't any good. You
Yeah.
shouldn't use brain games because it's not making any difference. So then people think, oh, well, that's rubbish. I won't do that. And actually, it's not an either or. It's that some cognitive training has been evidenced to improve and strengthen memory and concentration and focus, and some doesn't.
Yeah.
So it's a case of knowing which ones are actually evidence based and choosing the ones that are. So if you want your people to be thinking better, there are cognitive games, there are cognitive apps that you can use to help your people so that they can strengthen their brain. There are foods that you can recommend. There are recommendations you can give to them. But some of the organisations have also started introducing brain health hubs or brain gyms. So instead of just having a wellness space, we can have a space where people can be educated about their brain, and they can even try things like, I don't know whether your people have heard about things like, let me reach across for this. This is called Nettle. And it's not specifically for menopause, but it's for women's health. So for their mood and pain during typically through their menstrual cycles. So
Right.
this is an example of neurotechnology, which literally changes your brain using little electrical signals,
Right.
and most people don't know it even
No.
exists, but it's being trialed on the NHS, and it's doing extremely well for improving mood, menstrual related mood changes, which we know again, PMDD is much more
Yes.
the case in ADHD, and then we get these massive fluctuations. So they're looking at it for menopause, they're looking at it for perimenopause, they're looking at it for um, depression after pregnancy, postnatal depression. But you wear it like a headband. It
Wow.
even looks quite snazzy,
Yeah.
and it gives electrical impulses to the front of your brain here, which is supporting
Yes.
better mood regulation, the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, the sort of front part, and then also across the top where pain is processed.
Yes.
So it's kind of tackling those two key
Ooh, I'm really
at the same time.
interested. I'm
Yeah,
really interested in that. And you're right. I mean, the only thing I've been aware of, certainly for menstrual cramp and pain, is that my UV, which is basically small electrical, you put it in your knickers basically, in your pants. So it's like if we don't know what we don't know,
yeah, exactly,
we're
exactly.
disadvantaged, aren't
Yeah,
we?
yeah.
Oh, we might have to do a second one, Naomi, with
Separate one
with your
on
gadgets and
neurotechnology.
gizmos, all your tech. So I suppose the thing is, if we have to sadly wrap up, because when Naomi and I do chat, we chat for a long time. If you could change one thing in how society approaches women's brain health, cognitive health generally, what would it be? And the second part is what gives you hope for the future?
It would be every woman getting access to good brain health education. So we would be teaching everybody about their brains earlier, at every life stage, at every age. People would understand their brain. They would know they don't need a master's in it. They don't need to go off and study a doctorate in it, but to know enough about their brain so they understand what makes it work better, what makes it work less well, what are the things that can cause our brain to function less well, and what are the things that we can do to protect it, to restore it when it's not doing so well, and to optimize it, to future proof it so that it functions better at every age, and we end up with better brain longevity, which is this kind of area that I'm most fascinated. What can we do to make sure that our brain span is the same as our lifespan? We need
I
you
like
know we need
that. Mm.
We need our brain to last as long as we do, and that's not happening at the moment for a lot of people. So, um, but there are things we can do to improve our brain span, our brain longevity throughout our lives, and we need to be teaching people what those things are,
Yeah.
and helping workplaces to optimize it as well. And then what gives me hope?
Yeah.
Um, it's happening. People are increasing. I'm so excited that workplaces are finally now inviting me in to talk not just about resilience or about women's health generally, but about brain health. So I'm increasingly being invited to go and talk about it. I've done articles and podcasts talking about brain health. So there is definitely an interest. And when I've run workshops and taught people about neuroscience, one group said 15% of them were using neuroscience at the beginning of their session, and by the end of it, they said 100% of them said that they would be using neuroscience in their work. So people are interested in the brain. That gives me hope. People are finding it fascinating and empowering. That gives me hope. It reduces stigma. That gives me hope, and it's eminently changeable, and we can protect it throughout our lives. So I think brain optimization is and cognitive optimization is going to be the way forward, and it's happening.
Yeah, I love that. I really do because I think mental health, I am just going to say, it, I think people have become depleted, disengaging with the whole mental health topic. And I think largely what you said right at the beginning is because actually if we're not looking at cognitive health, like how do we keep people well generally, accepting that some people will translate and travelate across into mental health, which they then can then be supported with and then come back to good cognitive well-being. So it's almost like we need to go back much, much further, stop firefighting at this end, tool and skill people up. And I find children love this topic. Like when I
Oh,
work with children, like, and children who, newly divergent diagnosis, they just want to know why am I different to everybody else or what's the problem? Like, I'm okay. Why is everyone else reacting? And I love working with children in that way to go, listen, just come sit with me and we talk about your brain for a bit, and so I don't do a lot of that work, but I find that work really rewarding because when you just see a child go, okay, so I'm not abnormal then. No, your brain just fires differently to everyone else. But do you know what? You get different results compared to everybody else. So let's get you to understand what you're like and you can understand what they're like. And then I think really what you're saying to everyone is everyone who's missed out on that, which is practically everybody, actually you're different. And I think what it also lends itself to, Naomi, is when we can be generous enough to think, okay, now I understand a bit more about how I work. What about the rest of my team? And certainly with Strength Scope, which is a tool I love using, it shows people what motivates and energizes them. And then you can go, that's why I find it hard to get on with Dave.
yeah.
Because Dave's really different to me. And when I want to sit and chat at lunch, Dave just wants to zone out. You know, it just makes the world spin a little bit more smoothly, doesn't it?
It absolutely does, and I think you're right. And when we're talking about brain health, what we're talking about is that kind of umbrella idea that
Hmm.
your brain's responsible for all sorts of things. So it is your mental health, but it's also your cognition, how you think, how you make decisions, and your behaviors, how you behave, your habits, and your emotions, how emotionally resilient you are, how emotionally flexible you are. And when we think about all of those things and how we connect with others, and so our brain health encompasses all of that. And that's why it's so important, because when we think about our brain health, and we start to tie these things together, it really destigmatizes it and makes people realize everybody's brain is unique. It's not, we haven't got neurodivergent people and normal people. Everybody's brain is completely different. Everybody's brain is unique. Yes, of course, we have people who have neuro traits with ADHD, dyslexia, whatever they've got, and then people who don't have those traits. But everybody typically at some point has their brain not working so well, whether that's
Yes.
anxiety or whether it's that they've got brain fog. And that might be menopause, but it might be long COVID, or it might be from
Yes.
chemotherapy, or it might be from, anxiety and stress, or being a parent, or being a carer, or all of these things can cause our brains to work less well and give us brain fog. So let's just make workplaces where everybody's brain functions better.
Touche. Yes.
Thank you.
That's a manifesto right there. Well, I don't think there's a better place to finish on than that. That sounded like the big finish. So I suppose really what we want to do, because I know we won't have covered half of what people will be wanting to know, but I hope it's been a good enough start. So where can people find out more about you, Naomi? So whilst you just think about that, I'll tell them why they should even bother to go to that part of this, which will be on LinkedIn, it will be on YouTube, it will be on Instagram. Because remember, Naomi's credentials are phenomenal, and she's much sought after. She is the founder of Neuro-Informed. She is a leading light in neuroscience when we're linking well-being, performance, and learning. Right? Can't have any of those without the other. So where can people find out more about you, Naomi?
So I'm a lot on LinkedIn sharing things about the work that I'm doing. So they can find me on LinkedIn. I'll share the link. I have a website, neuro-informed.com. And I've also got some new things coming out, which I don't know when's this coming out?
Whenever you like it to come out, but it would
Okay.
probably be November,
Okay,
October,
so
November.
I will share some extra stuff with you, which hasn't been announced yet, but it will be in the next month or so. So I've got a framework that will be released very soon for training people in how to use neuroscience in their own profession. So neuro-informed professionals will be able to do some
Oh
training
my
and
gosh, I might be signing up then.
I would love to have you. I would love to have you. So that
Oh
people can
yes, well
actually learn
we
to
could
use them.
definitely get you back for a part two, so you could do a big rah rah on that because that would be fantastic.
I'd be delighted so that people can use this as much as they
Oh
can in
yeah,
their
we've
own
had
work.
returning guests, and I think you will be a returning guest, Naomi, for sure. Because it's so powerful what you're doing. So I suppose really this has been a brilliant podcast because the theme of menopause conversations is it's about knowledge, it's about connection, it's about confidence, and it is predominantly for women in midlife. So I think you've more than ticked all of those boxes. So from me to you, Naomi, thank you so much for generously giving your time. I know you're hugely busy. And for those people watching, if you're watching just as an individual or you're watching as part of, because our podcast is in corporate dashboards, Naomi, so organizations regularly share the latest episode. So if you
Fantastic.
are sharing the latest episode, you'll have all that you need to get in touch with Naomi, either on LinkedIn, either via her website. But for now, Naomi Glover, fabulous person that you are, all things brain, cognition, and well-being for all of us. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome.